you don't know what you're weak at until you have that loss. And then that makes you reevaluate everything once you lose. When you win, you come home, you're happy. When you lose, you come home with a different attitude and you work differently after that. And the team works differently after a loss because everyone's upset about it and you want to clean things up. So it's not easy staying on top, people coming at you and not becoming complacent.
Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Lassini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 58. My guest is Hall of Fame volleyball coach, Maria Nolan. Several years ago, she came on this podcast. So please check that one out to learn even more about her philosophy. Over 46 plus years as a coach, her teams won over 90% of their games. Just 15 matches shy of exactly 1,000 more wins than losses. Maria won 30 New Jersey state championships, 30. Two streaks stick out among them, 13 years in a row and 7 years in a row. Could you imagine? Outside of the gym and off the court, Maria is a kind, compassionate, and charitable volunteer, teacher, and leader in her community. It's a privilege and a pleasure to know her. I feel really lucky to have her back on the podcast for a second time. So without further ado, Maria, thank you so much for carving out the time and coming back on.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks.
So we didn't get a chance to do it the first time you came on here, and I wanted to ask you about childhood and upbringing. So if you don't mind sharing with the listeners where you're originally from, and then when was your first introduction to volleyball?
Okay, let's see. So I grew up in a small town in Hudson County called Guttenberg, which doesn't have a high school. And I attended North Bergen High School. And back then, in the late 60s, we didn't have female sports. So I went on to college to become a physical education teacher, and I couldn't wait to be on a team. Because that's what I was interested in. And I actually saw a sign in the hallway my first days at William Patterson to join the fencing team. So I said, okay, there's somebody might want me. So I went to fencing practice for a day or two, I guess it was. That weekend, I told everyone I was on the fencing team. And then the following Monday, I found out that, now this was September, but I found out you wouldn't compete in a match until January. And for me, that was just too long a wait after I waited a long, long time to be part of a team. So then that week, I saw a sign to join the volleyball team. It was a newly formed team, a new program. So that's what I did. So then I went out for volleyball. And
was it love at first sight?
A good player. Wasn't a great player, but everyone was learning. There was hardly any volleyball in New Jersey. Just some of the colleges had it. And during my freshman year, I don't think high schools had it, but maybe like later on, my senior year, I actually reffed a match at Ridgewood High School. And maybe only 5 teams in Bergen County had a school, 5 or 6 of the bigger schools. Teaneck, well, Clifton, I don't even know who else. Hackensack didn't. I don't even know if Paramus did. But so anyway, I knew I wanted to coach, and I got my first teaching job. Well, actually, I was at Passaic County Tech for 1 year, and then Secaucus. The reason I was hired, I had a driver education background to teach. And believe it or not, I had been a majorette, a captain of majorettes at North Bergen, and they were starting a new high school, Secaucus was. So I was hired to do that also. So it wasn't volleyball at first at Secaucus. I had to be with the newly formed band and color guard majorettes. But that year I actually reffed volleyball, my first year teaching in Secaucus. And then reluctantly, I was afraid to ask the superintendent if I could be the volleyball coach because I knew that wasn't why I was hired. And he agreed. And then I became the volleyball coach, the first head coach they had. because they had to
Amazing.
build up to the high school. They were going to Weehawken High School before that. So that was
Speaking of
my
first,
introduction.
my on my mom's side of the family, my great aunt lived to 112 and was one of the first women to graduate from William Patterson back in the day. Ironically enough, I wanted to know the difference between fencing and volleyball. Was it something that,
Oh,
like, when you started playing volleyball, you were like, yes, this is going to be for me, and you had a joy and a love for it right away?
yeah, I did. Fencing would have been fun too, I guess. I mean, I just didn't care. I wanted to be on part of a team. And actually, they had a very good team at the college. They won national championships, but I just didn't want to wait that long. And so, yeah, that's how I started out, became involved in my senior year, I guess it was. The New Jersey Athletic Association was starting an officials chapter. And I had been an official through a different organization at the time. I think could it be NJSIAA? I don't remember what it was, but anyway. So then the coach of my college coach recommended me to be secretary treasurer of the newly formed Northeast Chapter 2 volleyball officials, which still exists today, Northeast Chapter 2. So I did that for 4 years. I was secretary treasurer of the newly formed State Officials Association. So I became involved with committees and that kind of work right from the beginning.
So tell me about what's similar and what's different than first year volleyball coach
Oh
Maria
my
Nolan to the
goodness.
woman I'm talking to today.
Wow. It's so different. I mean, I just never expected that I would coach 46 years and accomplish what I did and have the experiences, meet the people that I met along the way, and all the great things that had happened along the way with just not, myself, but with the teams that I coached. And it's just been incredible. I mean, I could have never imagined that. And even now, when I think back, it's like, did that really happen? Did I accomplish that? Were we able to, do so much? And I had 2 different schools, at Secaucus for 27 years, and then at Immaculate Heart Academy for 19 years.
Why the transition? And what was that transition like for you?
Okay, so at Secaucus, I would have kept going, but it was tough. In fact, I coached even when I had young children, which wasn't easy. And I know many women actually stop or just give it up at that point. But I had a good support system with my husband, Tom, and I was able to keep it going. But my mother had Alzheimer's, so it became tougher for me to continue to coach at Secaucus. So I needed to give it up. My son was a high school football player at the time. My daughter was like maybe 6th grade. It was just too tough to keep going. So I didn't coach for 2 or 3 years. And then the opening came up at IHA. They were looking for a coach. I didn't intend to coach again. And my daughter at that time was registered to be a freshman at IHA. And the coach, who I really didn't even know well, called me up to ask if I could help because she was pregnant. And she then found out she was having twins. But at that point, my mom was still, at that point, she was in assisted living, and I just couldn't do it by myself. So someone recommended that I coach with a young fellow at the time who was a student of mine at Secaucus, and then he went to Providence College, played on the men's team there, loved volleyball. So his name's Mike DeCastro. He's actually with the Olympic Committee since 2013. And
Nice.
so Mike and I were co-coaches at IHA for 10 years. And, at first it was tough. I was teaching Mike, how to coach and what to do, but he became great at it. And within 3-4 years, all of a sudden we had a program that was very strong in New Jersey. And in 4 years, my daughter's senior year, we actually won the state title and Tournament of Champions. And then it just took off from there. So from that point, That was the 2007 season. Then we won 13 straight state titles.
Absolutely amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
you're helping Mike learn how to coach. Who taught you how to who taught you how to coach?
No, I just learned, but I went to lots of clinics. I went all over the place. I went up near Niagara Falls. I went out to Indiana to Notre Dame. I went to Ohio, Illinois. The 1984 Olympic coach was giving a clinic. I mean, I just tried. I was picking everyone's brain. It was hard at first because volleyball was new around here. And then you had officials that didn't know what it was supposed to look like either. So I remember my second year, I was trying to teach the girls how to play, and I was helping the officials how to look for illegal hits and how the game should be reffed. So I was doing both at the beginning. But it was hard because they didn't have an idea of how it should be. They just knew gym class volleyball. And it was very different. In fact, we used to call it power volleyball back then. I don't know, like that's how it started. My first year coaching was rough, just teaching them. I didn't have any seniors either because they were building up to it was a new high school and they didn't have a senior class. So I had 2 juniors, I had sophomores, freshmen, and we were 1-12 going into our last match that year. And I was a mess. It's like so upset. I go home crying every day. But we did win our last match. So we finished the first season 2 wins, 12 losses. And you didn't even play that many matches. Like now you play at least double the number of matches in a season. But at the beginning, it just wasn't like that. There weren't that many teams even. So it was a struggle at first. The second year we turned it around. I think I was 12-3 and then 16-2. I can remember some of the beginning years, but it's hard
See,
to
nobody thinks of Maria Nolan and 2-12. Nobody thinks of that. So how did you flip the script into a winning season the next year?
I just kept at it. I just kept, teaching the fundamentals, thinking eventually it will pay off. And again, I was learning. It was a new coaching job. It was tough. It wasn't easy at the beginning. Actually, I was getting married at that time. I didn't have children, but it was new. I was out of college, new job, and teaching a sport that was very new to New Jersey.
And I know you wanted to talk about it before we came on here, so I want to insert the importance of practice sessions, those fundamentals that you just brought up. So could you take us inside of one of your practices? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like?
Okay, so to me, practices were so valuable all the time. I mean, I think it's what made a difference, winning or losing, and how to plan your practice and what you get out of it at the end of it is what's going to matter when the team is in a competitive setting. I think a lot of people just think, it's a couple hours, 2-3 hours, let's just, go through it. And then I even see it when I'm reffing now. Coaches expect the players to do things in a match that maybe they weren't, open to or a part of in a practice. And you can't expect, as a coach, you can't expect anything to be done in a match if you haven't worked on it and practiced it. And the kids have to feel comfortable with whatever they're doing in a match. And it takes planning. I never once, or maybe maybe twice the most, but I really want to say never, ran a practice without a plan. I always have a written plan. It doesn't mean I completely stick to that plan. If something isn't working, I'll move on or I'll change it. I'll flip it a bit. I never went more than 20 minutes with any type of a drill or something to work on. And I get that from the great Dr. Rob Gilbert, who I know you're a big fan of and also a student of. But he says like your attention span is about 20 minutes. Even if you're studying, don't go past 20 minutes. Stop, splash water on your face, go, run around a little bit in the house, come back to it, and it'll be fresh. And I've done that in my practices too. I tried to keep a drill, maybe just, 20 minutes, or maybe rotate to the other side of the court, give a different look to it, or change it somehow, because you'll get the most out of your athletes if you stick to that principle. So, but getting back to a written plan is important. You need to know what you need to work on. And I remember people saying to me, well, why don't you just keep your plans from year to year and just use them? I found I couldn't. I mean, I actually tried to do that. Yeah, you can't, because every team is different every year. The athletes are different. And, when let's say you play a match on a Monday, well, then you know what you need to work on Tuesday, maybe put more emphasis on one thing or another. But even if you just practice on Monday, you still need to know, okay, what do we still need work on? Or what can I, phase in something new the next day. There's always something so I would write a practice plan every day. I'd start, in the top right corner, I would write this maybe 5 things that I knew I wanted to cover. And I'd start with that, the warm-ups. Maybe we would have 2 or 3 types of warm-ups. As the years went along, I got away from the calisthenics at the beginning, and I did more volleyball oriented types of warm-ups, and then you just work it and make it game-like. My practices would be designed, I would do a lot of individual work, and at the beginning, one of the things in volleyball is serve receive. That's it's kind of a boring skill to work on. But it's like one of the most, serving and serve receive are the most important. So I would make sure I did some of that at the beginning when the players were fresh, and could concentrate a lot on that. But I'd also have it again at the end, because when they're tired, they still need to, so you have to work that in. Even the serving, do it different times, and in between you work on the hitting and the passing, the blocking, or do some other things. So you need to design your practice. But the main thing about practice is the players need to gain confidence in practices, because if they don't have confidence going into a match, then they won't play well. It's just simple as that. And year after year, people would say, how do you do it? How do you keep all these teams every year? Because they would always, like, if you read about teams, it'd be like, well, we're stacked this year, but not next year. It's not going to be a good year. But I was able to, I had another plan for that too, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But I was able to keep it going by building confidence. And I think that was the most important thing, was confidence. And you develop confidence in practice.
And you were talking about that the first time I had you on, that confidence comes from knowing that you can do it, even though you're doing these mundane, boring fundamentals, they take up such a big part of it. My question there is, how do you know when to throw in the wrinkle, the iteration, the different set, or something fresh?
Well, it depends on their levels. Like you'll know when players are ready to move on to something once they've mastered what you're working on. And you want to keep them moving ahead and to keep improving, moving on to, more challenging skills. But you can't get there unless you know simpler ones first.
There's a book called Legacy about the New Zealand All Blacks, the rugby team. And one of the most fascinating parts in it is they say, when you're at the top of your game, change your game. It's like, what a weird idea, right? Because you would think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they're always thinking, they're getting scouted, teams are getting better, they have a target on their back. So they need to keep throwing these fresh iterations that once they rep it out and gain confidence and know how to do it, they have these different things that they can go to. And I think obviously that dovetails with what you're saying, is you have to be able to master the fundamentals before moving on to those things. But I think it's a very germane thing to talk about when you say, oh, as long as this is working, we should do it. Because as the pressure rises and you get into the playoffs, like these teams that you're playing against, whatever you were working on, you can't really rely upon that. You talked about the different personalities. I do want to talk about that. I want to ask you this. How do you balance, maybe balance is even the wrong word, maybe it's more rhythmic or something like this, the personalities on the team versus these non-negotiable pillars? Because you talked about the first time you were on here that the little things matter. And I think that that's for the whole team, but how do you also allow these individual superstars to kind of play and create and do their special flair?
That's not easy. And it depends on the players. Like I've had some players who were superstars that might have had an attitude that they were superstars. And I've had others that were just so down to earth, welcoming. I mean, there's a player right now, Nia Reed. She's the one I can think of, the best example. She's actually playing professionally now. She's with the league, the professional volleyball league that's going on. She's with the Omaha team. And Nia, after playing at IHA, played at Penn State, and then she played in Italy, Brazil, and South Korea a bit. But Nia was unbelievable. She was such a strong competitive athlete, but so cordial to everyone. Players that teams we played against, the girls would come up to her after a match, want to take pictures with her, smiling, talking with them, helping them. I mean, she was just one of the best at that, even though she was a superstar. So, it depends on who you have on the team. But I want to bring up something, because I used to be asked, like, how many players do you want on a team every year? How many, whatever. It depends on the girls that would come out for the sport. I never made my mind totally up of what lineup I would have, who would be on the varsity team, or who would be my starters. I would always give the players the benefit of the doubt, try out, let me see what you did, how you improve from one year to the next. And there's always a big difference, especially freshman to sophomore year. I would find that out at Secaucus especially. But, I never knew. And then I would maybe try a lineup, but I'll tell you what, I don't even know if it ever happened. The lineup at the beginning of the season was the same at the end. It was usually changed somehow by who was out there on the court, or how we needed to change things. So you have to be open to that. And by the way, something else, when we did lose, when you were talking about the rugby team, and this came to mind, when we would lose, I would always change something, because what happens is you become complacent too when you're always practicing the same way. And when you're on the top, it's easy for that to happen. And I think that's why so many times you'll see, like, the state polls, the teams that are number one, they have trouble staying number one, because it's not easy. They're coming after you. And sometimes you don't realize what your weaknesses are until you not sometimes, but a lot of you don't know what you're weak at until you have that loss. And then that makes you reevaluate everything once you lose. When you win, you come home, you're happy, you put in the stats and you go about your business. When you lose, you come home with a different attitude and you work differently after that. And the team works differently after a loss, because everyone's upset about it and you want to clean things up and make it work. And so it's not easy staying on top. People coming at you and not becoming complacent.
Not becoming complacent. I had Ben Ives is one of the episodes on here. Ben Ives was our character coach of one of the pro teams that I played for. He was a Navy SEAL for almost 2 decades. And he was talking about this sort of mentality that it's actually sometimes harder to bounce back from a high than a low. Because when you're low, when you're down, when you lose, all your brain wants to do is get back to winning again. But it's sometimes, how do you get back to baseline and come at teams in waves and keep climbing to higher ground, even when you're finding excellence? And I think going on the complacency thought, right? And this idea that you do change things when the team loses. How do you get the whole team to buy in, Maria? Like, you have these first team all-state starters, right? The Nia Reeds of the world. And then you have the last player to be subbed in. And I think the great teams have buy-in across the board. How were you able to do that?
Yeah. What happens is success breeds success. I know we've heard that before, but it's true. Like when the team has been doing well, the players want to keep that going. So it's easier when you've had success to get them to buy into that. It's harder when it's a new program, a new team, and the coach is working their butt off trying to get to that step, but once you have it, then they like it. It's so much better when everybody's winning. You're in the whole team feels better. And then they feel good about the work they've put in, that they accomplished, and everything is happening in the right direction. So, and we wouldn't lose that much. So when we did, it was upsetting, and everyone wanted to work harder. And we prepared a lot. I mean, that's it too. Like we prepared a lot. We watched a lot of film. We would even film our players too, to show them what we're talking about, because many times they can hear it, but until they see themselves with, on film what they're doing, they don't really understand it. And they'll be like, oh, there were many times that happened. I do some of that in my camp too, where I do the video filming, which helps them. Mhm.
I know that I breezed through it, but I want to come back to it. When you struggled, and you rarely ever did, and you had that 1, 2, and 12 season, but then you kept working at it. For a young coach who might be listening to this, and they're looking for a strategy, and they're working hard, right? It's not like they're not working hard. What advice would you give to that young coach who's looking to get over the hump and get to that winning begets winning, success breeds success?
Well, it's easy for me to say don't give up, but of course they don't want to give up. They,
Right.
They took the job, they want to coach, and my best advice is to just keep working hard at it. Keep making sure you're prepared, making sure you're prepared to run a great practice, and that the players know they're getting better each day during practice. And that's something I do. Another takeaway from Dr. Gilbert's sports psychology class was, at the end of practice, many days I would ask the players, and when they were done with their cool down, like, how did they improve that day? Just name something. And if a player had trouble trying to think of something, a teammate would say, oh yeah, like you blocked me 3 times in that drill. What do you kidding me? You didn't remember doing that? Like, so they have to see that they're making progress, that they're working hard, and they're improving, they're getting results. And that's what gives them the confidence to keep going. And that's how, that's why our practices were so important.
It's crazy you say that, Maria. I was just listening to Dawn Staley on a podcast yesterday. Obviously, she just went 37 or 38-0 and wins the championship. And she gave the exact same answer that you just did in terms of buy-in. She said, show the growth. You have to show them the growth. They have to see the improvement, or else you get discouraged. And I think from a sports psychology or just a general psychology understanding is the positive emotion comes from progress. Happiness comes from progress, long story short. And if I could just put in one footnote here, I was reading a book called Anatomy of a Breakthrough, which kind of has to do with kind of what we're talking. It's about from a guy named, he's a psychologist as well, named Adam Alter. And he was sharing that if you're a coach or just anybody looking to get out of a rut, there's times in which you need to exploit something, and there's some times where you need to zoom out and explore. And I think that that's the best advice. Like, some people find themselves in a rut when they should be in exploratory mode, looking for the changes because that wasn't working from the last thing, when they're exploiting something, or they're exploring too much and they need to be exploiting that one strategy and fighting through it. And that strategy's right, just because you didn't get the right outcome yet, right? You need to keep working on those basics. And I thought that was a great, because I never really knew how to get through a rut. They say in sports psychology, a slump is like a soft bed, easy to get into, hard to get out of. And the exploit versus explore was like the best thing for me to understand. Okay, that's maybe how you can change things up and get to the next level. One thing, Maria, that you always come back to about the players that you coached is you want them to be quick and gutsy. What else do you want them to be? What else do you want them to be?
Well, it's nice if they're intelligent, like that helps. But then if they are coachable, and if they don't care who gets the credit, the whole team benefits from it. And, I stress that too through the years. I know, players want all conference, all state, all this and that. But when your team does well, those accolades follow. And it's hard to get them if your team isn't playing well. So it's best for the players to just not care who gets the credit. We're all in this together. We have to work hard. And then, at the end of the season, a lot of them are rewarded for their efforts, and they get all conference, all league, all state, whatever.
There's so many players that you could probably pull from, but I would like you to highlight a team or an individual like you did with Miss Reed. Is there anybody that comes to mind for you or that team specifically, that they didn't care who got the credit? Maybe they weren't the most talented team you ever had, but a team or player that comes to mind.
I have a great story about a player, Catherine Fazio. Catherine, going into IHA as a freshman, was a swimmer. Her sister was a swimmer at the time at Penn State. And that's what, she was familiar with. Her father and mother were both college basketball players. And I got a call from who's now the president of IHA, asking me, my camp was filled up that summer, but Catherine Fazio wanted to learn volleyball. So I got a call, could Catherine come into your camp? She came. She was actually so unique as a camper. I had never seen a camper with the attitude that Catherine had, because of her hungriness to learn the game. Like, she just, right from the beginning, was different. And in the middle of freshman year, I moved her up to the varsity. And to make a long story short, so Catherine came in as a swimmer, didn't know volleyball, but she was such a great athlete and such a great team player. And really, I know someday she's going to be a great coach, because she has it in her, the teamness in her. But in the state of New Jersey, at the end of the season, only 8 girls make first team All-State. Senior year, Catherine was first team All-State in volleyball. And that's how great Catherine was. And then she went on to UConn and was a swimmer for 4 years at UConn. She's graduated a couple of years ago now. But just, had that team energy. And here's something she did that I came across recently. Her junior year, we had a senior who left the team for whatever reason. We had no seniors, but we won our state title, and we were in the finals of the Tournament of Champions. And we didn't win. Old Japan won it. And of course, the paper had a big article with that team celebrating. Well, Catherine took that picture, made copies, and her senior year, first day, her senior season, she handed them out to the girls on the varsity. But before she made the copies, she wrote in a marker across that picture, "This will never happen again," and gave it to the players. And I have that picture. But, a player like that comes along once in a lifetime, that you can coach and, be so excited about coaching a player like that, and be grateful to the team player that she was. Yeah.
I mean, and I'm at a loss of words. Rarely ever am on this podcast. You used hungriness and teamness in the answer there, which I just love. Right, that she had both of that. I mean, I just need to double click and ask one more question. Like, where do you think she got that from? Like, you think that's
her parents were competitor. Her father right now is president of St. Joe's in Montvale. He was at Don Bosco, principal and president of Bosco before he retired, and now he's back in it again at St. Joe's. And the mom was a basketball player, high school, and at Montclair. And the father played at Emerson High School back then and St. Peter's University. I mean, she had competitiveness at home.
There you go, a little nature and a little nurture, for sure.
It was great, and that, they knew that she would go on to be a swimmer in college, but still she gave it her all. She would finish her volleyball practices, get in the car, and then go to swim practice down the Parkway.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Just had it.
Extraordinary.
A few years ago, you shared on here on Grateful and Full of Greatness. I asked you weren't done coaching at the time, but I said, do you think you'll miss the nerves and you'll miss the pressure of the games? And I think you said at the time, I won't, but I'll miss the teaching. Is that still true? Do you miss the nerves and the pressure of the game, or is it still true?
The nerves and pressure. I think the time came where I said I had enough of that. And it was a lot of work to stay on top, and just everything else that goes with it. It was a lot. Now, after 46 years, it was time. I'm reffing now. I've been a ref since I was in college, and I do miss the teaching. Like, when I was reffing yesterday, boys high school, I see where I'd love to, help some kids out with this or that. I can't right now, but and I do still enjoy running a summer camp. So it's not at IHA anymore. It's back at Secaucus, where it was started years ago. And it's great being able to still do that and have people, a staff of about 12, 15 come back and help. And I like their excitement, with them coaching the younger players. And it's a lot of fun. It's great.
In sports psychology, a huge thing is making sure that the athlete themselves knows how to compete at their personal optimal arousal level, right? So they're not like over aroused to the point of panic and stress and anxiety, and they're not under aroused to the point of boredom and indifference. So finding that kind of optimal arousal level. What about for you as a coach? What was your demeanor like, your energy like from the sideline and the bench?
People always said I looked calm, but I wasn't inside. I really was, but people would say that. But I always felt all eyes on me. Like if a player makes an error, like I just tried my best not to show that I was upset. But I'm sure sometimes I did, or many times I did. I don't know. But it wasn't easy. I tried to, get the rest out of the background. But I'm not a yeller. I don't think that helps. I see some of that too when I'm reffing, and I'm thinking, I don't know, hey, if you think you're going to get more out of the kid because you're yelling, I just don't think that helps. I think that makes them more upset, more anxious. Like it's not relaxing them to focus on what they need to focus when they're worried about the coach yelling at them. Like that's not going to help. But that's the style of coaches. It's not my style.
What it makes me think of is there's this book that I ripped through. It was by Morgan Housel called The Psychology of Money. And yes, it's about finance and money, but it was more about the psychology of it and handling your emotions. And the part that I want to pull out that has to do, that you've just provoked in my mind, was he says that you should be pessimistic and optimistic at the same time. And when I'm listening to you, Maria, you have this healthy dose of like, we're not there yet, or like we could be better, or we need to be better. You have that kind of, it's not pessimism, but it's like, it's paying attention to the particulars to make sure that you are ready and prepared for the game. But you also have this embedded optimism that we will win and we will find success. Am I on top of that? Is that fair to say?
I think a lot of it, especially at Secaucus, because I used to feel that a lot of it was just confidence, even walking into a gym, that the other team would see, like, we have the confidence to win. I think, and when I say the little things are important, that's one of them. But I was around the game long enough to know that anything could happen. And I've seen anything happen in many matches. And people would always say, oh, you're playing this team or that team, you're going to win, you're going to win. But I never took it for granted, no matter who we were playing, because I knew anything could happen in the match. So, I was always grateful, when we had a, nice ending, but I was smart. And I guess that's why there was such stress on me, because I was always worried, how would we do? Because I knew you never know.
Yeah. Maybe the perfect line that you just said there was never took it for granted. Something that I'm sharing with athletes that I'm working with right now is I came across this thought, and I keep repeating it because I'm trying to think it through, is you deserve everything and you deserve nothing. And to be honest, that has this mentality that, like, the confidence of walking into the gym, that we can do this, we deserve this win. But at the same time, at practice, you have to work like you deserve nothing, right? Even when you're on top, not having that certain level of complacency.
It just brought to mind when you're saying this, how younger athletes, like let's say 8th graders, they're going into high school, and they know that they're pretty good. They're very good on the teams that they're on right now. And they just think like it'll be, no problem. I'll get on the team. I'll have a position and whatever. And maybe that will happen, freshman, sophomore year. But I found over the years too, they never look back to see the younger people coming in that might even be better than that. And then a lot of times they're disappointed because maybe junior, senior year, they're not in the lineup the way they thought they would be, the way they anticipated. But and it doesn't matter. Actually, I just had a conversation about this with my cousin the other day, who has a son who's thinking of not playing football in the fall. And the talk was about the coach, how the coach wasn't playing a lot of kids on JV, and that she was saying, JV doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, and I explained to her how I ran my program, and that it doesn't matter. What matters is who deserves to play, who deserves to be out there, and who you're developing that from JV will be varsity next year. Who you need to focus and give more playing time to. Everyone's not going to be equal out there, but I think in their minds, a lot of times they don't realize who their competition is, or realize there could be competition with them. They just take it for granted, and they're not maybe working as hard. If they knew they had to, like the young people you're working with now, I think that's what I would say to them. Because I said, you never know. You never know, like what will happen to you, or who's coming after your spot. Like, you need to work hard all the time, not just when I'm with you. You need to work hard on your own too.
Yeah. Maria, I think you'll like this one. I love the word humility. Like everybody I admire in sport and in life, they have that level of humility. They might be like brilliant, and you even watch Caitlin Clark right now, and she still has this level of humility of like inspiring the next generation. And one of the cool definitions of humility that I heard is, what I do not know is more important than what I do know. And I think that's a great definition of it. Like, I got to learn, I got to be better. Even when you were a young coach, traveling all over, it's like, even though I know a little bit.
Because I knew I had to learn.
Right.
It was important. But the main thing is working hard. It sounds so simple, work hard, but it's the key. I mean, if you work hard, everything will fall in line. The good things will come. But
a story that comes to mind, because that you just brought up about, like, they got to be careful because of who's coming in. Barry Davis, a coach for Rider University, I heard him speak. I think he has a master's in leadership too. He's one of the most winning coach, 800, 900 wins, closing in 1,000, like someone I know. And he was saying that there was this shortstop that he had that was an All-American his freshman year, All-American his sophomore year, All-American his junior year, and then his senior year, he lost his spot to a guy on his own team. And that guy who took his spot ended up becoming a Navy SEAL. And he was just like, kind of like the Catherine mentality, like back up, and then took a 3-time All-American spot. It's like, those stories exist. And if you don't think they exist, they're everywhere, right? You just need to look hard enough. And I think something that I have, and I'm always preaching, is what is delayed is not denied. Keep the faith and keep working at it. And I think that if you can maintain that mentality, it won't work out on your time when you think it's going to happen. But if you keep working at it, it will happen eventually. Maria, tough conversations. Tough conversations is something I want to ask you about, because you probably have had to have a lot of them over 46 years. Like positions, you said people that play the position that the team needs them to play. And I'm sure you've had a lot of these, I deserve more playing time. Could you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could go way back. I guess it was the 80s. Someone who actually replaced me at Secaucus as a coach when she was a player. Her senior year, we needed her. She was an excellent hitter. She went on to play at St. Peter's University. But we needed her to set too, just not hit. And I remember walking over to her one day and saying, she actually finished my sentence. She knew what I was going to ask of her. But, the team needed her to do both. And she willingly did it. We won a state title that year. But that was an easy one. But sometimes players don't want to do that. They don't want to switch position. And sometimes the parents don't agree with it. And when I said Catherine's junior year, we had a senior who left the team. That was one of the reasons, because the parent thought she should be in a different position. She was actually better in the position where we had her, but they didn't agree with it. And so he took her off the team. But
how do you handle that, Maria? How do you handle those conversations?
There was nothing I could do with that. I was like, we went on, we won the state title without her. We didn't win the TOC, but it happens. It happened many times during the course. And then I remember having a player who didn't like that position. Like one year she was a middle hitter, then she became a right side, which you don't get as much action. But then the senior year she was back in the middle. So it depends on the personnel on your team, like where, if you need players in different positions. And we spoke about Nia Reed. Well, Nia Reed for IHA was a middle hitter. She goes to Penn State, and she at first was an opposite, I think, and then she became an outside hitter. So, but you're explaining this to people, to parents, then sometimes they don't get it. Like, you can play different positions. It doesn't mean you're stuck in volleyball anyway. But a lot of times, they want things to be their way. But those conversations, they're not easy.
No, and I'm sure they're not. And that's why I wanted you to ask, because if there's a parent listening, or if there's a coach listening. It's always good to have someone with you listening on that conversation too, because you could be accused of saying something that you didn't say. Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I know those are constantly happening. And I think both those two last topics, like the player needs to keep working for the position that they want, even though, and buy into the role that they currently have. And then, those tough conversations. You and Coach Anson Dorrance, UNC women's soccer coach, over 21 national championships, have the same philosophy on no captains, shared responsibility. Why? Okay, so I found that there were years where I had the players select a captain, and there were years where I selected a captain. But along the way, I saw that it only created more drama, I guess, with the girls. Like, girls don't like to be told by other women or girls what to do. But back then, when I decided on no captains, it was in the 80s. I think to the societies may be different, but back then, boys were brought up to listen to authority. The army, the regiment stuff. Girls weren't doing that back then, but boys were used to that. So having captains in boys' sports, was fine. But with girls, once the girls' athletics came into play, that it was just girls didn't want to hear it. And then I read, oh boy, I can't remember the name. I actually spoke at a conference down in Washington, D.C., and I used part of her book for it. It was a sociologist, and maybe it'll come to me while we're talking. I should have had it ready for you. I'll put it in the footnotes if you remember later.
She spoke about how it had to do with language and how people speak and how they understand each other. And after reading and learning from that, I said, you know what, I'm just going to try it, no captains. So the year 1988, I tried no captains, and we went undefeated. I was like, okay, that's it. But I had the team shared the responsibilities, such as the warm-ups, the equipment, deciding what gear you want to order, anything like that. It was many times I would have the seniors in on that and give them the leadership. I wouldn't, no matter how many senior, I never had a lot of seniors, maybe like 6, or maybe one year 7 the most, but usually, 4 or 5 seniors. But I'd have them lead the warm-ups and be in the front and give them leadership roles. And I would also switch around captains who would go, because you have to go for the coin toss in volleyball. So I would change kids around with that too, so that they had the experience of doing that. In volleyball, you have to have a captain on the court playing. So most of the time, that person, many times would be the setter, but other times it would just be someone who I knew would have a good understanding of the rules and be able to communicate with an official. Okay, great. But as far as having a team captain for the team, no. And I found it to be better.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a difference maker. The question that I would ask underneath that is, when you look back at those over 4 decades of teams that you've played, what did the teams that seemed to find a way and go undefeated, or not just undefeated, but found a way at the very end of the season, seem to have that the ones where you underperformed in different years didn't have? Could you talk about the discrepancies of those teams?
Determination. It was definitely, they had the determination, especially to keep the legacy going, to keep working hard and continue. Yeah, they had the drive, the work ethic.
Maria, I'll tell you a cool story. I had the privilege of going over with the Premier Lacrosse League to Japan recently. And on the last day, we were able to go see a sumo wrestling event. And there's about 600 to 700 sumo wrestlers in all of Japan. And then the top 70, you could start to make money. And at the end, I went up to the translator who spoke to the two sumo wrestlers who had already been sumo wrestlers for about 15 years. Their career was over, and now they're doing this to teach. And I have it right here. I asked, what do the top sumo wrestlers have, you know, that the other hundreds or even the lower top 70 don't have? And they both started slamming on their chest. And their answer to the translator was Shinji Tai, which means heart, skill, and body. But the ones that really, really separate have the heart. And I love that answer, right? Because you can have the skill and you can have the body, the craft work to that, but the determination, like you just said, the desire.
Yeah.
Were you able to coach that, you think?
Through practices, the way you design your practices and the drills with the outcomes, you just don't, you have to have a goal in the drills and in your practice sessions. For everything you do, you have to have something in mind that you want to accomplish with it. And then you can keep moving ahead.
It's amazing, Maria. Like the episode right before this, maybe you're not as well versed in lacrosse, but his name is Gary Gate, arguably, and some people wouldn't say it's arguable that he's the best offensive player that has ever played. And now he's the coach at Syracuse men's lacrosse. He said the same thing, that you do not do a drill unless there's an intention behind it. It's pretty amazing. And I think that just gets lost. It's like, we're just going to have practice today, but you're so particular about that.
It just irks me when I see a coach walking in, holding a cup of coffee and standing there during the warm-ups or talking to another person during the warm-ups. When you do that, your players are not warming up the way they should. We didn't talk during our warm-ups, but the players weren't allowed. But you could see if I started talking, I could see that they were doing. Yeah, it's, again, that's one of the little things. It's
one of the little things
that mattered. But yeah, you definitely had to have goals, directions, and the practices need to be game-like. Like you have to work on things that will happen in the game. You just, you have to make it game-like. Somehow you have to, if you can't find the drill online, and there's so many now, you could just YouTube stuff and then think of things yourself. Think of how you can design what you need to accomplish. Like you have to do that because your team, what they're able to do. I actually enjoyed the practices. I enjoyed running the practices, not so much during the games, believe it or not. I know people love that, the thrill of the game and the match. I enjoyed the practices more.
Yeah, it sounds like it gave you a little bit more heart palpitations than you needed.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Yeah.
So I want to be very conscious of your time. Last 5 minutes here. I want to finish with you and just talking about you. And you coached for so long. Would you say it was a job, a career, or a calling for you? Maybe it changed over time, but do you ever see it differently?
Start again. A job, a career,
or
I guess
calling.
It became a career. After so many years. And way back when, I used to think, oh, I wouldn't do it that long. And then I became involved with the National Federation of High School Sports. They govern all the high schools, all the states. And I met people that were older than me and that were doing it, more years than I was. And it was like a light bulb went off. Because I didn't think I would do it that long. Because back then women didn't actually. Like it was new. And then I realized I could keep doing this if I enjoyed doing it. I could keep going. I remember someone that I replaced on the board, he was a wrestling coach from Wayland, Massachusetts. And he had coached 40 years. And I was like, you could coach that long? You could coach 40 years? And, he did. And I just met a lot of other people like that. And then I kept going then. But at the beginning, I didn't think that it would be this long a career coaching.
And I know I know you'll shut me down on this one, but you are truly so remarkable. Not only do you do what you're doing on the coaching front, but, devotion on the home front as a wife and a mother. If it wasn't coaching for you, could you imagine yourself doing a profession that was different, pursuing something else?
No, I always wanted to be a nurse, but I know I couldn't, but I think I would have enjoyed being a nurse. But
Okay.
other than that, I can't picture anything else.
And then you specifically, perhaps the final question, what traits would you say made you successful as a coach?
I think the work ethic, the time I put into it to become better, to learn from people. And thinking back, I wouldn't care who it was, even if it was a parent that had a suggestion. I remember P. Flora at Secaucus. He, would, say different things to me, but I always said to myself, maybe he sees something I don't see. Like, let me listen, so I always, wanted to hear what other people thought. And then sometimes if, I didn't agree, then I, would do whatever I thought I had to do a certain way, but I still wanted to know, was I missing anything? I wanted to make sure, cover all the bases with it.
I love the open-mindedness. Doc Gilbert taught me this one. The famous composer, Stephen Sondheim, when he was asked how he composes such great music, his response was, I listen. And I thought that was great, right? Just that open-mindedness, that curiosity, and mindful of what others have to say. And it's not just my way or the highway. Is there anything that you wish I asked you, but I didn't bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then I guess I would say, final message that you would leave to someone listening that you've learned throughout your entire career.
Yeah, I think, have patience. And if you work hard, I think, the good things will come. And I also think, you're a role model to these players. So it matters how you act, what you say, and, what they learn from you, because I think that's why you're in that role also, not just for your own benefit, but, for the benefit of the players and what, they can use later in life and learn from you. I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I know success breeds success, but it also leaves clues. And that's why I was grateful to have you back on here, because you certainly are a role model. Thank you so much for all of this, Maria.
Any way I can help again, let me know.
All right.